of the art of copy and the art of design coming together is very important. I think what people do in the awareness phase, some brands do it, is they focus on so much messaging right up front. It's like you've missed the point. The point with awareness is to grab the attention and bring them in. Once they're in, they're now invested into learning more.
Funnel Visionaries.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Funnel Visionaries, where we talk a whole lot of realness about the customer journey. I'm your host, Konrad Sanders, and in today's episode I'm joined by the very astute Ryan Phillips, Creative Director at Sunwing Vacations Group. And listen, it's a banger of an episode today. We dive into contextual targeting, time banding, location banding, the loyalty loop, all kinds of just gold. So let's get stuck in. Ryan, thanks for joining us on Funnel Visionaries. How you feeling
Thanks,
today?
Konrad. Yeah, all good. We are in fall season here, but weather's still nice.
I wonder what's nicer. You obviously lived in England for a while, which is where I'm based. Not known for its weather, let's say. What's the difference between London and Toronto?
Do you know what? I mean, culturally, Toronto is a melting pot, right? It's very similar to the UK in some elements of there's a lot of cultures, which is great. It's wonderful to see. I think cultures breed creativity, which is something I love. I think one thing is the weather is definitely a big difference. We have seasons. We have all seasons.
Yeah, actual seasons.
Yeah, we go from like plus 35 to minus 35
Wow.
in different areas. I will say though, the other day it rained, and somebody at one of my kids' football games said to me, "Must feel like you're back in England because it was really coming down." It was that I said to him, saying, "You'll probably know." I said, "Oh yeah, it's that real wet rain. It gets you right wet to the bone." And he was like, "That is a weird statement, a weird phrase." And I was like, "It's just very fine rain." But yeah, I would say the one thing my wife noticed. My wife is I'm from Toronto originally. I'm a dual citizen, but my wife is a full Brit, right? And one thing she loves the most is it's minus 35. It's freezing outside, but it's bright sunshine. It's not cloudy. So it's cold, but it's just very nice. It's very picturesque in that sense.
I think that's it. Like, we get 4 seasons in one day over here, but there's that. Yeah, it's the gloominess which is the worst. I think that lack of vitamin D. I'm not sure if I can handle minus 35, but yeah, I like the idea of having 4 seasons.
Layers.
Yeah, that's it. Layers on your face as well. Just a balaclava. So you can tell it's a very British podcast. We started off by talking about the weather, but before we dive into before I grill you about all things marketing, I'd love to start with a little fun segment that we call "What Really Spams Your Sanity," and essentially ask you, what spams your sanity when it comes to marketing? What's your biggest marketing pet peeve at the moment? Anything that sort of gets under your skin?
Yeah, I think this will probably be something similar that you guys hear a lot. I hear, "Well, we don't talk to our customers that way," or "Well, it's different in this industry," or and I think where people make big mistakes is they try and categorize their industry as something very, very special. And actually, you're convincing people to do something. So whether you're convincing them to book a vacation, buy a house, buy a car, buy your product, it's about your message, it's about the creativity. And the minute you put your brand into something, and I used to see this with people who did internal comms, it's like, "Oh, our people don't think that way." It's like, actually, they think the way everybody thinks. They still go home. They still watch the movies that everybody else watches. So I think personalizing people is important, but categorizing an industry is not.
You know what, that really resonates with me, because we are, well, a sector agnostic agency, for want of a better phrase. Work a lot in the B2C world, retail, travel, but on the B2B side, that happens so much. And we do work a lot with B2B, especially the big corporates, right? The big corporates that, often, whether they're in the what we call unsexy tech world or consultancy, there's often pushback to what we know are best practices when it comes to copywriting and persuasion and, conversational copy. It works. And yeah, they very much often do put the industry in this box. We don't talk like that. No one in our industry talks like that. Our prospects don't talk like that. And there's a kind of a misconception that, if you're talking to a business, because it's B2B, we shouldn't be human, we shouldn't be creative, we shouldn't be authentic and conversational, which
Yep.
we know as a copywriting agency is not true. And like you said, it's a bit of a cliche, but H to H, we're always talking to humans. We're talking to people that respond to the same emotional triggers, psychological triggers, etc. But I love that response. You mentioned the word creative there. That's something I really want to dive into for this episode, because you are a creative director, and we're talking about customer journeys and funnels. And I love, as I said to you before, on your LinkedIn profile, you talk about the intersection between creativity and psychology, which is something I'm really interested in myself. So I'd like to start by asking you, how do you approach creativity differently at different stages of the funnel? So awareness, consideration, decision, and brand loyalty for travel brands specifically, because that's your
Yep.
current industry.
So there's I would call my partner in crime, one of our leaders who looks after brand. He very simplifies things. I love it when people simplify things down, because essentially that's what a lot of the stuff we do is. We're not, we're solving problems, but we're not surgeons, right? So I think one of the things he says is there's two things you really need to focus about, and they're very big things. One, who's your audience and what are you doing? What are you solving for? Like, what is their problem? So if you can start to understand your audience, it's massively important. The different types. That's where your messaging, the creativity comes into being specific to them. But then when you start looking at what value do you add? I have the great job of leading a team who has to create every ad, everything that comes through, whether it is you seeing a billboard or you're on the website, and all those play different pieces. So if I look at the awareness stage is really a big reach play, right? So you're really trying to get across. And I would say this has been my entire career, whether it's been travel industry or not. I think you need to give them at that awareness stage something sexy, that FOMO piece. So we have, we're fortunate enough as a brand that we invest a lot in our TV commercials, but we also invest a heavy amount in our photographies. Having people feel like I need to be there, and time of year is very important. When it's cold, we want people to be like, get out of -30 and get into that +30. Getting people to go, I need to get there. But I think placement is also very critical. So we have our partners in media agencies working on placement with us, and time bending our creative is very important. My team love and hates it. We get lots of work to do. People go, oh, well, we've got this big awareness play. Let's throw a big awareness message, which is great. But we also need to make sure that if we're putting that message all day and it's a digital space, great. Well, can we time band that creative? Still has the same sentiment, but when I look at the travel industry right now, and this is something I talk a lot about with my team, is we're making a lot of out of home. We're making a lot of radio, TV. So we're not competing against just our competitors in the travel industry. We're competing against the likes of Nike. We're competing against the likes of Budweiser, all those brands who advertise at the same time as us. We need to go, I don't want somebody to look at our ad and go, oh, that's okay. That's nice. Like, you need to be in the same sphere. And I think when you're I always say to a lot of people that when you're marketing in that big giant that space, that's how you have to be. You have to be dog eat dog world in some elements. We use humor as one of our biggest things for one of our brands, our Sunwing brand. Relatable humor. So it's not, I'm no comedian, but I think where we look at it is people see it and go, I see what you're trying to do. We call people out on Spotify people on Spotify listening to an ad have not paid for premium. So we call them out on that. We don't call them cheap. We say that they're all about value, and we got great value with what we do. So we want people to be like, I would like to look at our ads as entertainment. Once you can start peeling that back, we still have a job to do, but we make it entertaining for ourselves, but also for the audience. And then once they come to, probably going a long way around this question, but when we
this is great, and I think, like, I asked a big question. I asked you a big question with many elements, and there's all these great points you're making that I'm gonna come back to, like time banding, right message for the right people at the right time, competing with people outside of your. So don't worry, I'm parking them and I'm writing notes. I'm going to come back to those, but like, I'd love you to, because you've sort of touched on awareness there, and I'm going to sort of intersect with a question which hopefully will you probably were going to answer as you continued anyway, which is, do you think there's more room for human and creativity at the awareness stage? More room, or maybe is it more necessary because you're trying to kind of grab eyeballs and get attention, compared to like consideration and conversion and those and further down the funnel.
Yeah, all areas are really relevant, and they. I think you always have to excite somebody, inspire somebody to, look, booking a vacation is not cheap, right? It's not like we're not selling. We're still selling volume, but we're not
Mm,
selling a Kit Kat, right? Like,
yeah,
they have to sell at scale, but their ads are like, oh, I'm not having to part with a lot of money. So I think we have to give people I really need to get away. That's that awareness piece. I definitely think there is definitely a lot. There's a lot of storytelling that's in there. There's also the art of. I always love the art of copy and the art of design coming together is very important. I think what people do in the awareness phase, some brands do it, is they focus on so much messaging right up front. It's like you've missed the point. The point with awareness is to grab the attention and bring them in. Once they're
yeah,
in, they're now invested into learning more. Once they're learning more, you're hitting them with more of your personality that they can align to, but you're also really not overselling them anymore. I think if you start to, and this is the same when it comes to pitches, I learned this a long time ago from a creative director I used to work with, of over pitching. And it's relevant in storytelling for ads is once they're in, you don't need to convince them to be here. You've convinced them to come in. Stop convincing them of the awareness stuff. You now need to give them more of like, oh, I'm sold. Now what? Well, here's what
yeah,
I can offer. So the element where we have is, the good thing from a tracking perspective is we actually know where people are on the site when we get people into our funnel. And we can see from a click perspective where people's hotspots are. So we know where we want people to go. So we make sure that there's the right message, the right imagery. But once they're in that area, is like, what is it in for them? Why should they choose this brand? What is all the selling features? And then
yeah,
there's so much imagery and video that is not there to bombard them, but is there to guide them of going, I'm going on a family resort. Does this have the right amenities for family? Look through the images. Oh, wait, great. It's got a big water slide. There's a lot more things that are in there. And then people, of course, will go down more paths of cost. Cost is always going to be a huge factor, right? But once you take the cost out of the element and they kind of know where they are in terms of a cost banding, they start looking at the values of the place they're going.
yeah. Yeah, cost versus value. I mean, you mentioned it before. It's not even if the flights or the package is arguably kind of cheaper than competitors. You're not selling it as cheap, right? It's selling the value
No,
that they're getting.
yeah, and the good thing with we're fortunate with the brand on Sunwing. I mean, like I say, I've got 5 different brands that I control. They all have different selling points. I think if I stick with the Sunwing brand, that brand is value vacations, but you still buying 5 stars. You're going, you go
Yeah,
5, 4, 3. You can go down that list. But I think one of the big things that we went with from a brand territory is save more, do more, and that is the brand line that we go with. So by saving more, you can do more on your vacation. So all of them are all inclusive packages that we sell. But we work with
it,
excursion partners, and that's where you do more. You've got the ability when you save money, you can actually go, my money goes further.
which from a copywriting perspective, which is obviously the perspective I often come from, like that's brilliant because you're kind of like your one thing we like to do even for landing page copy is ask so what. It's always like so what. All right, we're saying that so what. And when it comes to like saving money, what does that actually allow people to do? What does it really mean saving money? It doesn't really mean anything until there's a benefit of having that money to do so. You're explicitly kind of feeding them the benefit of how they can kind of capitalize on that within a holiday itself, save more, do more. So yeah, I love that.
You mentioned that so what element and asking why. I think I say this with my team a lot is why do I care? Like ask yourself why you care. Like it's not just for the job. Like you need to look at it from that perspective. Like if you're a consumer in anything, like why do I care? Like do we put all this copy on a page because it ticks a box? If that's the case, that's a wrong thing to do. Like is there value in every
Yeah.
people are short on time as well. So like time is very important to people and it's like I'll give you the stuff you need. If you want more, we can bury it in somewhere else. But like, we got to give people the right facts that they need, and that's where copy is incredibly important. But I think
I'm
people
glad you agree. I'm glad you agree with that.
do, and I might go on a tangent here, but I think this is where I
Please.
have a slight issue with AI. I like AI. We use it but I find myself that AI makes people a little bit lazier in
Hmm.
getting to the point. AI will grab stuff and put it together. But I think where people fail on things is there is an art when it comes to creating ads. there's, definitely an element of psychology, but asking for AI support is enormously beneficial, but more from a researching perspective. If you do all of your work through
Absolutely.
AI, is where you lose your tone, is where you lose your personality. And I really feel that we need to make sure that we look at it and go, there's an art to this. And it's not just a visual perspective. When you marry that visuals with the right copy, I've seen people who are using it on platform, who are using AI in, say, Meta, and the image is like a beautiful family. And then it says, the messaging that's been done through AI through their platform is like romantic getaway. And you're like, with the family? That's a weird
Yeah.
kind of come. And so I think
Yeah.
that's where we need to just be mindful that, it's a lot of work. Like the stuff we
Yeah.
do is, and I push the team to make a lot more copy and imagery than is always needed. Just so we have our media teams have a lot to work with when they want to
And
segment
they can
segment their
A/B
audience down.
test and let the data decide.
100%, 100%.
I think, well, you've opened up the AI can of worms. Like, I've got lots to say about that. It's something, as just for everyone to know, it's something we've embraced as an agency. We believe in the right way. So we're building a growing family of bots that serve different functions within the agency, all the way from like marketing, biz dev, and client services through to the services we offer. But we believe we found where those strengths and limitations lie. And I think that's key, is understanding the tech itself and where the limitations are and how to swerve them, how to use it in the right way. So the best use cases we've found, as you've mentioned, Ryan, is, the research piece, breaking things down, even we're doing buyer interviews or running surveys, like aggregating that data, pulling out voice of customer language that we can then feed
Yep.
into the work we create. But lazy is the operative word there. I think lots of marketers were lazy even prior to AI, and it kind of gives them even an easier way to kind of go here, prompt, and create something that often is, cliched. It's prone to creating cliches. That's how the technology works, right? It's kind of picks
Yep.
the most obvious next word based with some variability. So naturally it's prone to kind of like creating the kind of copy you see everywhere. And just doesn't have that sparkle that we want, in, as you mentioned, in order to compete with the Nikes of this world, who are, essentially running ads alongside you guys and everyone else. So I'm a big believer that the collaboration is where it's at. The now and future is collaborative between our chaotic, creative human brains and our ability to understand all the nuances involved, and the power of AI. It is very, very powerful.
I will.
So
I was going to say, I would say, nobody comes yelling at me about AI. I will say we have embraced AI from for a multitude of things, right? I'll just clarify slightly. So from a design perspective, we use it to save time on certain elements, and it does a great job at some things. Where I really will say about the laziness, and where I see this, is an easy prompt, which spits out a result. And then you're like, yeah, that's not hitting the mark. And then you can really find people out who are over reliant on AI. The over reliance is like, oh, I did all this, and they submit it, and you're like, that's great. Oh, we need to make some changes and things, and they're like, what do you mean? Because they can't adapt and change the copy. Because that's
yeah,
where I feel we're getting what I love. I love technology and I love the element of AI. What I don't like is the over reliance on AI.
absolutely.
I think there's a lot to be said. I will say it again. I think there's a lot to be said for the art and the science of creativity. And just like a painter paints, and just like they do it for enjoyment, I do the job because I love it. And if you have to take all of the enjoyment out of it because you can't let us create something, that's where it gets a little bit hard. AI has created some really good stuff. The cliche stuff is very interesting. There's a multitude of words. I was in a session with somebody who was focused on AI, and they said, oh, it does a lot of cliches, so you have to put all these words in and say, don't use these. And I'm like, just write this yourself.
Yeah. Look, funnily enough, on LinkedIn today, I wrote a post which is 7 ways to spot a lazy ChatGPT prompted LinkedIn post. And I've identified certain things where I can, an emoji in almost every sentence. To be very granular here, it chooses to use an M dash rather than any other kind of punctuation. And yeah, all of these things. But yeah, I don't want to go too far down the AI rabbit hole, as much as I could definitely talk about it with you for the rest of this session. I think we're both in agreement there, right? We both believe in the art and science of marketing. Like, that's where you get the best results. AI is in my opinion, falls into the science bracket currently, and it should be harnessed. But to get the best results in marketing, it is about blending that and getting that intersection of the two areas. I think like some amazing things have come out of what you've been saying so far, and a couple I made a note of were what I believe to be almost like two, or should be two, key mantras for marketing. One of them is ask, why should they care? I think that's just such a great sort of exercise to weave into every corner of your marketing activity and strategy and and tactics. The other one was, essentially getting the right words to the right people at the right time. And you mentioned time banding, right, with your ads. Can you kind of explain a bit more exactly what you guys do with that and how it works? What do you change when it comes to your ads, depending on time of day or like audience
Yeah,
and where
so
those placements are?
yeah, there's a few different ways that we look at it. So I think one of the things I work with our marketing partners and especially our media partners. So our media agency will obviously recommend a whole host of different things, from digital ads to out of home ads, and they all have different purposes, right? So our digital ads are not, there's engagement levels, there's awareness, there's conversion, there's different tactics, right? So all copy comes into different forms when we're talking about what the tactic is. But if I look at a high level on time banding, I also look at it's also location banding, right? So when I say there's an art and a science to it, there is a catch-all message, which you push out at any time of the day, and it doesn't matter. Yes, you may be hitting the wrong demographic at some point, but you're doing a catch-all, right? So there's a big point there. I think when we look at the real-time banding and location banding is if our ads are serviced within a specific geographic location of a grocery store, our messaging has got to be around that food. It's got to be about the different things that you can experience in destination. When we look at time banding of the morning commute and we're stuck on billboards, it's like we might not help you navigate through this, but we could help you be out of this by putting you in vacation, right? Like, so there's areas where we look at that. When it's somebody at a bus station, at a bus shelter, you actually have to make sure that is, why are they at the bus shelter? Because they're having to take the commute. So you actually have the message about why not commute here instead? And we do a lot with the weather network when it drops to a certain temperature and it's like, it's -3 here, but it could be this here for you. So I think there's definitely
Yeah.
elements that we have to play into that. I think when it comes down to demographics and things of that nature, we have to look at what are the sites that we're advertising in or the locations where it's family. We need to be pushing family. We also have different geographic areas which are more prone to booking. So say the West Coast, I have to get my geography right. The West Coast are more prone to going to Mexico because of the location. With 80% of those going to Mexico, our messaging is definitely geared towards Mexico travel, right? I'm not saying we don't just say there's everything because people want to go to dots places, but we definitely focus around there. And I think that it wasn't this company. It was a company in the UK where we did an ad, and the big messaging was like, it was a home builder. I won't say the one, but what we were trying to say is like, you may be stuck in traffic, but it's okay because you're going home and everything's better when you're in this home, which was a really great point. And I think one of the ones that's my favorite is there's two ads right now that we're running. One, I like to skirt the line a little bit with offensiveness and when I'm trying to be humorous. One is the freemium users. So if you're hearing a Spotify ad, it's because you don't pay for premium. So a lot of brands I used to see, oh, do you want a mini? We got great minis and nothing wrong with minis. I used to have one. But the ads are just so like mass market ad. Whereas we're like,
Yeah.
hey,
Catch all.
freemium users, some people might call you cheap, but not us. We say you're of value. And we really go into that messaging. And same with when we talk about areas like relatable things. One of the biggest relatable ones is when you forget the day of the week where you think it's Friday, but actually it's Thursday. So we call out the person who says happy Thursday and you're like, oh no, it's not Thursday. So there's this kind of like relatability in terms of our messaging. And I always say that we want to make it entertaining, right? So nobody goes, my God, that ad is like a TV show. But if we get somewhere close to that, bottle up that kind of recipe where people just get a laugh or a smile, whether it's seeing something, we always want to add value. And that value is when you come and you see what we can offer. But I think for the catch-all ads, we have to bring a smile. We have to bring a little nod of going, I'm stopping looking at that because it's unique to where I am, unique to me, and it's raised something in me. So some emotion has got to pass in order to have it. And I really believe in any brand needs to harness the level of understanding their audience wants and needs but also making sure your personality really comes through, because I think people don't just buy because it's the right price. They buy, so some people buy more expensive stuff just because that brand is in tune with their personal values. And I think we need to make sure
Yeah.
that a lot of audiences choose brands because there is an inherent value in the personality that you're coming across as. They believe in you and they get a relationship with you in that way. So that is a high level. We do a lot when it comes down to the bottom end of the funnel when people have booked. There is definitely legal messaging we have to give on, hey, this is what time your flights are. But then there's also upselling things of what you can do. There's a lot of different loyalty messaging that comes into, especially if you've already booked. You get hit with an email first that says, these rates are coming to you first because we value you as a customer. And those messages are very personal.
Do you think that there's, because you kind of moved from like sort of top, we talked about top funnel awareness piece, moving them to the site, that consideration stage, and then like the conversion piece. So, bottom funnel, and then what we like to call at our agency AFFU, after funnel. So once you've converted them, such a key part of the journey that a lot of marketers kind of ignore because they think my job's done, I've got leads and I've got sales, right? When the reality is, if the end goal is driving revenue, we should definitely be focusing on
It's
current
the biggest.
customers. And
It's one.
yeah,
But I call it the loyalty loop, right? So you should
yeah,
have your awareness stage should have a big amount of content, and then when they're in that booking path, there's another consideration phase in there in terms of booking. Once they're in that loyalty loop, there's a lot more work to do because you want to keep them, right? You want to make sure they have a
absolutely.
great experience with your brand, but then there's more communications. They can opt to, I would say our email team, we obviously feed a lot of stuff to our email team, but our email team does a really good job of really bucketing our audiences, and we have a very low unsub rate, and we have a great
Awesome.
conversion rate when it comes to that. And I think that's very much into the loyalty is not just one catch-all loyalty. I sound like a broken record with this, but I'm very big on every bit of creative that you make has got to be personally and tailored. Even if it's tailored to
Yeah.
a big amount of people, there has to be some personal element to it, because you will get high unsubs if you just do a blast out, right, of one message. So
Yeah.
we do make sure that there is a lot of different content that is served to the right customer at the right time. You
It,
don't want to be hitting somebody with a message, hey, book your next vacation, when they've not gone on their vacation.
yeah.
Want to make
It
sure they're hit within a certain time period.
it sounds like you're tailoring almost as much as you can at each of these stages, like the awareness piece. If there's only so much tailoring you can do. You need to, it depends on how much you know about the people that will be consuming that content, right? So as
Yep.
you've already explained, if it's a Spotify freemium users, you know that about them. That's what you know, and you're weaving that into your messaging and your creative, which is, I think, is brilliant. If you're, I think you said to me earlier, in the financial district and it's a billboard ad, you can assume that a lot of the people, majority of people, are work in that certain field, and you can kind of weave that into, again, the messaging and creative.
Well,
And then I think once you get down to the loyalty loop, once you get down to, post sale, you would know much more about them, right? Because you've got that data from the website. So you can really start to segment there and be even more personalized.
yep. I think the other thing is looking at the core customers who you already have within that loyalty loop helps serve who your customer is. Who is
Mm.
our current customer? What is our aspirational customer? And how do we have to keep those people and get more of them? So I think there is definitely that in terms of the financials, because we talked about that off camera, I believe.
We did.
We're currently in the middle of a new brand territory, so a new brand campaign, which is why the financial district is a very important one. We have tried to create a campaign which is still about save more, do more, but is very much in tuned with the market and how everybody is. Everybody, you're hearing things of recession. You're hearing, people are financially struggling. So we have an area with ours, which is we've got a new person who acts as an agent called our financial advisor, and their job is to make things financially make sense. So we're taking a little joke on financial institutions like banks who are always doing ads about, have you saved up for this? Have you done that? So we're almost like having a little fun at their expense with that. So we're doing it. We have a line where that just makes financial sense, or financially savvy customers. And where we're playing a lot of stuff is the financial district is a fairly big one. Is at the catch-all message is around making those financial savings. But during the rush hour commute, all those people are going to work and they work in the finance district. So we call them out. We know that you're financially savvy, or financially savvy as you call it. And then we're trying to get them
Yeah.
to look and go, what? financially, because financial isn't a word and we've
Yeah.
invented it, but it makes sense if people understand it. So that's where we have a little bit of fun with our messaging. We definitely take ourselves seriously, but also have a laugh at our own expense.
And there's that, like you said, humor. There's kind of pattern disruption there as well. It's not just the obvious kind of go-to wording. Like you said, it was, if it makes people go, that's sort of what you need at that stage, right? Of grabbing eyeballs' attention, and it's about moving them down the funnel. Would you say there's, because we've talked full funnel here, which is brilliant. That's what the podcast is all about. So I love it, and I love talking about AFFU and that loop and how important it is from not just in terms of maximizing customer lifetime value, but also feedback, right? Understanding your audience so you can get more of them. What I was going to say is ask even. Would you say there's as much room for creativity in those lower points of the funnel, like conversion, the email marketing you've mentioned, like the post sale, what do you call it, customer loyalty loop? Do you use creativity as much? Do you use it at all? Is it more kind of hard facts at that point, hard kind of benefits facts, or what does that look
No,
like?
creativity is intrinsically linked in everything. And by that, I mean, we can have hard facts, but we've got to make sure they're digestible in the right way. But they should always
Mm,
be married to something which is the experience they're going on. So we do have, I like to use FOMO as a thing, that, you want people to be there. So we invested in some great imagery. We've invested in some great case studies. They're not your traditional just, I went to a vacation and it was great. It was, talking about the experience, talking about the things that you can offer. So when you're in there in that conversion stage, there's always an element of upsell. And that upsell is more about the things you can do more of. And so when people are looking and trying to convert, we're showing them the value that we add. And there's definitely a lot to be said in terms of people are visual people. People like to read. We need to make sure everything's digestible. So if you gave everybody a lot of management people, we need to sell all this messaging, throw it at them. It's just not gonna. People aren't gonna read that.
yeah.
I think there's some definite things that people do need to take away and T's and C's and things that they have there. But when we're converting people, we're converting people's wants and needs. And we need to really we have done a lot of work and a lot of insights to work out what those wants and needs are. And that is creative in its own right. When you come to creative copywriting, it's identifying the wants and needs and making it facts, but also making it in the same personality. Everything through our brand is done through the same personality. I don't want people to read a cold piece or see a cold piece of information and be like, oh, that's
Mm,
a hard fact. It is a hard fact, but it's been written in a way that you understand it. So we're not trying to be too clever, but it's a way where you're going, I know what this brand stands for all the way through, even though people aren't going to think that way. People aren't going to go, they've used that word because they're trying to be a bit more fun. But the experience they're going to have through the whole booking process is this is just a great experience.
yeah.
And if I'm having a great experience booking, I'm going to have a fucking amazing experience on vacation. And I think that's one of the real elements we want to make sure is once you make a bad experience with somebody, technology is one with all the stuff we have. Once they have a bad experience, it's a real hard mountain to climb to convert them even further.
Look, you've talked about, again, like, it's been such a good conversation. I could go for another hour or two. I've written more notes with this episode than other ones, because you've been touching on so many points that really resonate with me and with what we do as an agency. Not to make it about us, but we developed this framework called the 13 lenses, which we apply to all copy across the entire customer journey, from top funnel to after funnel. And it's basically like we turn it into a scoring matrix. It's a way of blending ingredients, right? So we've got the goldfish lens, which is about digestibility, which you mentioned. We've got the creative spark lens, which is about, techniques to weave in creativity. There's the brand lens, which is staying true to the brand. The value lens, you talked about value. There's the context lens, which is about understanding context, which you guys have do in spades. And it's actually quite inspiring how granular, in a sense, you guys get, even with your advertising, because it's so common just to see brands putting out the same ad, right? They get their core concepts. That's great. A tagline, boom, there you go. Doesn't matter where it is, it's the same. Whereas you guys really apply what I would call that context lens in a way where you're thinking through every single placement and blending all these ingredients, which is what we would always recommend, no matter where it is in that journey. It's not like you just blend those ingredients to get their attention. You're also making sure there's that consistency in voice, in your technique, your approach, all the way through. And like I said, inspiring, because I would say not that many companies do it in such a thorough way. So, like I said, I could keep talking, but we're running out of time. And ironically, just as I said we were running out of time, technology failed us and broke the connection. But I just want to say a huge thank you to Ryan for sharing all of his wisdom and insights and his story. And I'll see you on the next episode of Funnel Visionaries.
Funnel Visionaries.